I must say, I love that story. I heard it for the first time in the first person a few weeks ago. And that wonderful moment when the 17-year-old Bob Heft puts the president on hold to see whether his boss is going to let him go to the White House at the president's request. And then when he comes back with that wonderful and charming naivete of youth, has given the president permission to call him by his first name. He was like, well, I can call him by his first name, and he says, Dwight, are you still there? And the one thing we need to have in our minds as we look at that scene, and especially contemplate it in the light of the things that are going on these days, is that when he said that, if you had been able to look at Dwight David Eisenhower at the other end of the phone, you would not have found the president taking umbrage at some young guy who dared to call him Dwight after he had been general of the armies and defeated one of the greatest terrors in the world, and so forth and so on. All he would have done is smile in a kind of fatherly way and say, yeah, I'm still here. And that's what he did. And that is something so deeply, so stunningly American about that moment. We need to stop and think about it. And it's stunningly American not only because Bob Heft was raised to be somebody who could be on the phone with the president and still have a sense of his own dignity, of his own worth, no matter who he was talking to. No downcast eyes, no mind held down by the chains of deference to nobility, but rather a free human being, a citizen of the United States. And what is even more impressive is that the President of the United States on the other end of the line, after the illustrious career that had etched his name in history for all time, still understood that as he was President of the United States, it's true, but he was also still a man who had risen from being nothing more than a young boy like this and had achieved all those things because of the path of opportunity opened by the freedom we know in our land. And so he responded to him as well he should have. Remembering, too, I have no doubt that Dwight was, like every other American, one of the sovereign body of the people of the United States. And when the president talks to him, he is speaking to his boss. When are we going to remember this? And when are our representatives, whom we elect, going to remember it? For they clearly seem to have utterly forgotten. And so we are in the midst of a crisis. And though bombs and bullets do not fall and battles do not rage on our soil, yet it is the crisis that will determine whether the terrible foreshadowings of all the great statesmen of American history, from the founders to Lincoln to the present, who understood that we would never be conquered, we would never be overcome by foreign forces from abroad. But when our freedom fell, it would fall because we brought it down ourselves through the neglect of our Constitution and our laws and our moral character. Amen. And that day has come. Yeah. It's not coming. It won't be here in 5 years. It won't be here in the next generation. We shall decide the fate of America when we go to the polls in 2010. And if we do not send to Washington, D.C., people with the heart, the boldness, the courage, and the understanding to stand up and boldly declaim against what is now the outrageous robbery of our rights and destruction of our Constitution, then in 2010, this nation will end as a republic for all time. It's time we wake up and understand the battle has long been raging, and its climax has come. And they have already taken into their hands the reins of power, who I fear are designated by the providential judgment to execute upon this nation the consequences of an altogether too long reign of evil. And those of us gathered here in the name of pro-life should fully well understand what I mean. We were reminded tonight by Deborah that this nation was founded on a simple, clear premise that we are all created equal and endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. If we think that through, Those unalienable rights, which as the Declaration says, are the basis for the premise that government must be based upon consent. Now I have to take a little departure here, just to point out the practical consequences of that, which we are forgetting, and which our leaders are forgetting, and which we in the pro-life movement are about to destroy our movement by forgetting. What do I mean? I mean that we are actually allowing people to stand forward and bid for leadership and put the pro-life label on who do not believe in the Declaration of Independence, who do not accept that the moral premise of the Declaration is the moral premise of the Constitution, that the Constitution is a house built on the premise that we are all created equal. When that premise is rejected, the house must fall. No one who claims to be a constitutionalist should dare to suggest that the Declaration of Independence does not govern government at every level in the United States. And that means, whether it's the federal government, the state government, the county government, or the local government, any government that violates the unalienable rights of the citizens does what is unlawful and illegitimate. No state government can have the choice to take the life of innocent human beings in the womb. Not the mother, not the father, not the patient, not the judge, not the president. No one in this country can violate that natural law of God. And a lot of you need to think through the consequences of this, because you're starting to go down a road behind people who have told you that they are states' rights when it comes to abortion. This is not a pro-life position, and it will never be. It is, in fact, if you put the pro-life label on that position, you are setting the movement up for destruction, because you deprive us of the only argument we've got that trumps the individual right of the mother. People standing forward, and I listen to them talk, and I say, well, the federal government and the courts, they don't have the right to do this, but the state governments have the choice. And I'm thinking, they're not pro-life, they're pro-choice. They just think that the choice can be exercised by the state legislature, which is a government. Right. Now tell me, if the Declaration is true, and the purpose of government is to secure unalienable rights, how can a state government have the prerogative to destroy the unalienable rights of the unborn, to countenance that destruction, to refuse to defend and secure that right, when the overarching aim of all government, if it is just, is to secure the unalienable rights of the citizens? That means the politicians who say, I'm states' rights, I will overturn Roe, but we can get it back to the states. They are not pro-life, they are pro-choice. They have rejected the Declaration. And they go down a road where when the other side comes forward and says, excuse me, you say that you're pro-life, and that means that you believe that Roe versus Wade should be overturned, and the individual woman should not have the right to decide what is done to her body, what happens to her in this way that deeply affects her life, that her individual right and responsibility doesn't mean anything, but it belongs to a state legislature. Would you justify that, please? Why mustn't you respect the privacy and right of that woman? Do you know how we answer that now? We answer it by invoking the Declaration, by invoking the will of God, the Creator, by invoking the fact that we claim all our unalienable rights on the basis of God's authority. And if we deny that authority when it comes to the child, then we have denied it when it comes to every single one of us. And we set ourselves up for a government that is no longer limited in its power. Conservative, I'm for limited government. Don't even realize that the phrase limited government meant limited by respect for the moral laws of God. Not limited in power, which is what they claim. Not limited because the Constitution draws the line. People always say, why did the Constitution draw those lines? Why do we have elections? Why do we insist on due process? Why was anything that is in the Constitution put there? You think the founders just made it up because they thought it felt good? They reasoned it as a deduction from the principles of the Declaration that these things were required, and they judged the Constitution in light of the justice that the Declaration demanded, and they didn't judge it good until they were satisfied that those demands had been met. Politicians today who pretend to be for the Constitution but are willing to turn their backs on the Declaration of Independence are either ignorant or they are lying. But they are not pro-life, and they are not true to the foundations of America.